All right, today we're going to talk about the Sentinels trilogy by Malka. This is a sci-fi trilogy that everyone put on my radar last year, and I got to read it this year, and I buddy read it entirely with my friend Shannon at That's So Polo. And that was really fun for both of us, because I think we both agreed that this isn't necessarily our bread and butter in sci-fi, but reading it together, we really got to highlight and see things that we did really enjoy, and, you know, kind of power through the stuff that wasn't our cup of tea. And like all of my Should You reads, I'm going to just try and take away a lot of my opinions and help you decide, is this the series for you to try out? Because I do think there's an audience for this, and I'm so glad that this series exists. So, first of all, what's this about? This is a world where we have microdemocracies, and what that means is every 100,000 people makes a Sentinel, and every 10 years people get to vote on their democracy, and there are hundreds of options. You could basically be your only Sentinel of that government. The governments don't have to be contiguous, so certain government systems can just be patchy all over the world. There are different rules for each Sentinel, so you literally could walk into another neighborhood and suddenly pop-up ads are not as common. The world is so interesting, and there's this force called information, which is kind of the fact checker of this world, because the idea is in order to have a functional democracy, you have to have an informed voting base, and that information needs to be fact-checked. So that's the world. It is so fascinating to read a sci-fi world where we skip the part that's like, how did we get here? How did we go from our nationalistic government to microdemocracies? We're already here, and so now the thought experiment is, well, what does this mean? How does this work? And the plot that she chooses to put over this is like espionage, kind of action movie plot. So our main character, Mishima, is kind of essentially your classic Tom Cruise character in a Mission Impossible movie, but she's Mishima. Like, she's not Tom Cruise, but you know what I'm saying. And so it's through these kind of episodes that we see this world evolve, and we kind of follow the thought experiment of how does this function, what are its faults, and things like that, and getting to explore the world, because when we have this really connected global space, getting to go to different countries is definitely a part of it. You are traveling this globe as a reader. And so that's my biggest selling point to people for this series, is that the thought experiment and world building are exquisitely thought out. Like, I really loved exploring that, mainly because I think I am desperate for any type of world building that explores different government systems. I want to see that. I just want to see what that might look like, especially in the sci-fi space. Like, obviously, imperialism, empire, classics, they're never going away. But sometimes it's nice to see something new and see the pros and cons of that system. And that's what we get to do here. Especially, so the first book focuses on just introducing us to this system on the eve of an election. And, you know, I said it's got action movie, espionage stuff, so obviously games are afoot. This is not going smoothly. And then the second book, we take place in a null state, or near null states, which are places that have not accepted microdemocracy. So now we kind of learn, I mean, it's probably talked about in the first book, but we really see hands-on as ourselves, the reader, that not every part of the world accepts microdemocracy as the new, you know, common thing. And what does that mean? And what are, you know, the pros and cons to why people chose to be in null states? And then the third book, State Tectonics, is kind of looking at this system in a pivotal moment of, will things stay the same? Will they change? There's a lot of catalysts in that third book. In each book, you follow a different character. And so now I need to get into the part where I think is going to be the weakest, but I don't want it to necessarily deter you, especially if you're someone who really likes classic sci-fi. Like, this is like a modern classic sci-fi in terms of its writing style, in terms of its focus on ideas and world building, but with a fun action plot over it. But the characters' work also reminds me of classic sci-fi, where I'm like, these aren't bad characters. Like, I would say this is serviceable character work. Like, I wouldn't say that these are all paper cutouts. It's not as bad as when I read Foundation by Isaac Asimov, and I'm like, I know nothing about any of these characters. They are just there for exposition info dumps. It's better than that, but not by much. Each book you follow a different character that you've met in a previous book. And you do get to interact with our characters from previous books. Like, Mishima is in all three books. And then we meet this character Ross, and Ross is in all three books. And same with Mariam. Like, these are our three characters. But I found that when picking up the next book, I was starting from ground zero and getting to know the new main character. Like, what I learned from them as a supporting character in the previous book was harder to transfer for me. I just think the character work's execution is very sparse. That's probably the word I would use. You have to put a lot into the character to make them vibrant. That doesn't come from the words on the page. And what also kind of sucks is that the audiobook for this series is also kind of dry. So you get different accents and inflections from the audiobook, but I wouldn't say that this is an audiobook narration that really brings it to life, where sometimes you can have that. Now, despite that, I actually do feel like I know these characters. It just takes me a really long time to feel connected to them, and I don't actually understand or believe all of their motivations because the character work is not the focus of the series. This is not character-driven, although you do get to see some minor character arcs and you get to see some payoff for character decisions. That does happen. Like I said, it's not that it's not there. It's just not the focus. So if you are character-driven, if you read stories to be close to characters and character interactions, it always gets better by the end of the book. But the start of each book was always really rough for me. Now that said, if you are a plot-driven reader and you love action and you love twists and turns in your stories, that's in here. The number of times that you are like, oh, we're in a new situation. We have to pivot here. New information's just happened. Oh, that's a new big thing that happens pretty well. Like, it's pretty well paced in that regard, if that is the type of story you like to consume and read. And I think that's also just a really interesting way to explore this world and thought experiment. Like, it's just interesting. There are also some things about this world that are not in our world that were really interesting to like learn about and parse out. So Mishima, our spy, our main character, she has a narrative disorder. So it's basically she's neurodivergent in this way that she makes too many connections that aren't actually there and makes everything an epic narrative, is essentially what this disorder is. And it's really interesting to see how she handles it and copes with it. And then we have Ross, who has a lot of prejudice that she has to work through. Like, I say the character work isn't that great, but I do feel like I got to watch a lot of these characters grow and respond to their environments. I think the entire series takes place over about 5 years approximately, and it's really interesting to see a start and then finish after 5 years and see the arc of this story and the conclusion of the thought experiment. So it's for those reasons that I'm really glad this series exists. So if you're someone who likes Mission Impossible movies and who wants to see a new government form and really fascinating technology, like the translation technology, this information technology hub, and like how we discuss it thematically and figure out what is good and bad about this, that's a big conversation in the third book. It was fascinating. You'd think it would come up earlier because, you know, we are always thinking about Google and how much information Google and Amazon have, but it is there, but it's not as heavy of a concept to the third book, but parsing that was really interesting. So if you like these ideas, this book really unpacks them and, you know, parses them out. And I do recommend buddy reading it with someone, because that was what was a lot of fun for Shannon and me, was just trying to figure out what was happening, who we were suspecting, because there's just like a whole bunch of time where I'm like, I don't trust this person or this person or this person, and I don't know how all 7 of these threads are coming together, but I'm sure they will. and that's the type of story it is. It's like you have like so many mysteries, and they seem all unrelated, but you trust that the story will somehow converge it all, and it always does. And it always has an interesting payoff. I will say, if I had to order my enjoyment of the books, it would probably be like, actually, no, they're all really equal. So that's another positive of the series. It's consistent. So if you read the first book, which has a consistent arc within itself, like you can read the first book in isolation and never continue the series. I will say the second and third book, I think, are more tightly connected. But you read that and you're like, I liked it, didn't like it, whatever your opinions are. That's about what your opinion will be for the rest of the books. Because it has that level of consistency, which I think is pretty valuable in a trilogy. You don't really have dips or high points or anything like that. So that's this video. If you want to leave an emoji, is there a poll emoji? If there's not a poll emoji, leave a computer emoji. Let me know if you've read this series and what you thought. Let me know if you have any questions about this series. Are you interested in trying it out? Otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.